Hello and welcome to an interview with Laksh Ranganathan, and she's a Senior Flow Advisor at Tasktop.
Hi everyone.
Thanks for having me. So we'd like to talk about today about finding flow and what that means in work and in life. There's a lot of times when there's disruptions to individuals' work, when you're trying to work and getting to the outcome where you want to be. But then when you have this disruption, it's really then hard to get to the outcome necessarily, and you get less efficient, and you might also feel a lot less fulfilled as well. So how can organizations support us in finding flow and being more fulfilled and more efficient?
Yeah, that's such a great question. The reasons why there are interruptions to work can vary from environmental, external to internal factors. It's such a big spectrum. The COVID lockdown is a great example of where a lot of organizations have been put into this place where people have to work from home with children, having to take care of elderly relatives, and sort of not have a space to de-stress. On the other side of the spectrum, you could have reasons like operational factors, where people have too much on their plate, which means that they're constantly switching between tasks and can't focus on one item at a time, or because of time zones, they just can't seem to get that time to work with this other colleague to make decisions. They just can't seem to get that meeting in place. So it can create so many different, there are so many different solutions to these depending on where the problem might be. But if I had to sort of pick one thing that sort of helps across some of these, is if organizations can create that blameless culture where people feel safe to be able to voice some of these interruptions without that feeling that it'll get put on them as a reflection on them. I think that's absolutely important, because then we know that individuals can come together and find a solution to some of these problems and these interruptions. I was at this really great conference a couple of years ago, and there was this lady who was, it was within a very IT space, but she was talking about how they put all of their work journey on this huge wall. And it was a small company, but everything from development to sales would all go on this wall, which meant that every time something that didn't go right as they planned would get flashed out there. And in the first week, people would go, oh my God, that's one of mine. That didn't go right. But within 2 or 3 weeks, they were able to see so many others were facing similar issues. They had delays, there were sales deals that were falling apart, which meant that there were these groups that were forming. They were going, oh, I had this problem a couple of months ago. Looks like this is a common problem, so let's try and solve this. So I think what I'm trying to say is to make those failures visible and provide that environment where people feel comfortable and safe to voice them, means that the solutions will follow right away. So to me, that is most important.
And you mentioned some of those discoveries that you've made within conferences, and with your customers, you explain to them and discover how to create and connect this flow of organizational units and resources and information. And sometimes we refer to a value stream. And so if you think from an organizational level, you mentioned that smaller company where they could really kind of show the flow of work, but within maybe even larger organizations, what happens then if that flow of work is disrupted? What's the implications and impact of that?
Yeah, so the concept of value streams and value stream management itself, the key ethos there is, instead of looking at different functions within the organization, you put this customer in the center, and you look at how value you provide as an organization value to this customer. And by extension, what that means is the value that you provide is directly correlated to the business results or business goals, or business KPIs, whatever you want to call it. It's directly correlated to those. And what that means is, if you can visualize the value that you're delivering, you can also see the impact it has on your KPIs like revenues, retention, new logos, cost reduction, even things like brand recognition. So what that means is, when there are bottlenecks and you can see those, to me, those are sort of missed opportunities to wow your customer and increase those business results. And to be able to see that will enable organizations to sort of focus on what needs to be done to get that, to deliver that maximum value to the customer. And I think that is key. And that's where these impediments of flow and relating them to the impact that they have is important.
Yeah, and I guess then the opposite is true as well. When you have the impediments to the flow, then on the other hand, when you do something about it, you do improve it, you then would see some of those metrics improve as well.
Absolutely, absolutely. And you have something that you can prove that making this change actually increase the value. So similar investments can be made within the organization, and you have sort of data to support those investments going forward.
Yeah, so it's a little bit of a chicken egg situation as well, isn't it? So to find the right metrics, you might need to make some changes, and to make some changes, you have to find the right metrics.
Yeah, and that's so key. It's like the whole concept of agile within IT. Taking an iterative process with some of those and doing them in small intervals helps come up to that point where you find that right balance. You're right. Getting that right the first time is probably not realistic, but start with something. You have a gut that this is going to measure the value that we're delivering and will relate back to the impact. Try that for a small period of time on a small part of the organization, and tweak it until you get to a point where this is realistic, and then apply that to a much larger section, and that enables to experiment with least disruption, if that makes sense.
And then individuals will be able to then kind of see that their individual impacts from their organizational metrics as well.
Absolutely. And I think this is quite key, because in smaller organizations, there's quite a lot of transparency, and it's easier to understand what the organizational goals are and how individual work relates back to those organizational goals. As organizations grow, this separation sort of increases, which means that it's not always clear the kind of KPIs individual functions or individual teams have, how that relates back to the organization level goals. The more we bridge that gap, the better feedback individuals have to prioritize their work in a way where it directly complements the organizational goals, especially in times like these where the lockdown has sort of, a lot of organizations have had to sort of claw back some of their projects and keep just the core functions going until we get to a point where we can move forward. Something like this is absolutely key, because individuals can also prioritize everything that's on their plate to be able to focus on the things that matter the most, and that matters the most for the business, and deliver the right business results for the organization.
Thank you very much. And as final words, is there any predictions that you would see which companies or what type of companies will thrive, and not just survive, but thrive in the future in the post-COVID world?
I think the key thing there is organizations who are able to be resilient and quickly change to meet their customer needs, and who can anticipate what the new appetite that people have. So now if you look at most people, they're more open to different ways of working, doing conferences remotely, which no one would have ever thought of a year ago or even 6 months ago. So realizing that there are some opportunities there and being able to focus on those and capitalize on those is going to be key. And a lot of traditional businesses, it has become quite clear that IT is core to everything they do towards their customer, especially in a situation like this where everyone is working remotely. So organizations who can capitalize again on that and be able to make the most out of it and treat IT as a core to their business as opposed to just a cost center is important, because that's the differentiation that most companies have right now.
Yeah. I would like to say thank you, and I can't help but notice you mentioned conferences, and next week there is the DevOps Enterprise Summit.
Of course, yes.
Yeah, and Tasktop are quite visible there as well. So have you got any favorite session that you might want to attend or you would recommend?
Oh, we've got Mick Kirsten, who's the CEO of Tasktop and the author of Project to Product. He's doing a keynote at DevOps Enterprise Summit, and I'm really, really excited about a panel that Nicole Bryan, our Chief Product Officer, is doing with one of our customers as well. So definitely catch that. I think it's going to be great.
Well, thank you very much for those tips, and thank you, Laksh, again for attending the interview and sharing your experiences.
Thank you so much for having me.